I'm going to hand straight over to my colleague Henk van der Kamp. Henk is, as I've said before, head of the School of Spatial Planning at DIT. We, of course, like to think it's the premier school of planning in the whole island now, and becoming a leading school with a growing reputation in Europe and beyond. And much of that is attributed to the leadership that Henk has given to it. Henk, I consider to be the leading academic planner in Ireland. Some people consider that to be a damnation in its way, but he has a particularly practical and professional bent, having, I think, previously been president of the Irish Planning Institute and also chairman of the Urban Forum. Henk, over to you.
Yes, I've been asked in 10 minutes also to give an idea of the outcome and the experience of the project, which again was looking at the 8 gateways outside Dublin in the National Spatial Strategy. And I think that it is worth doing that because of the themes that have already been mentioned. So the key drivers for this idea that the Eastern Corridor could be the focus of urbanization in Dublin in the future are the political and economic integration of the two parts of Ireland, which of course is not certain. The weak urban structure outside the Dublin-Belfast conurbation, this idea that we essentially are talking about the city-state nation. And thirdly, the pull factor, the economic strength of the Greater Dublin area during the Celtic Tiger period, the availability of the infrastructure, particularly for inward investment, and also the proximity to UK and mainland Europe, perhaps psychologically, but physically as well. So this idea came out of the project, particularly when we had one of the 3 national workshops that John mentioned, where we looked at the spatial implications, that we actually said we could be expecting that predominant population growth will take place in the northeastern quadrant of the country. If we draw just literally across the island, that you would expect to see most of the population growth, the economic growth, to be happening in that northeastern quarter. And the concerns that we had, that the study team had about the existing situation in policy terms are these. The risk of drift, that the National Spatial Strategy was drifting from reality, the risk of dilution, and the decentralization policy was often mentioned in this regard, that in other words we are not implementing the National Spatial Strategy as we should be, the risk of incrementalism, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment, and also the risk during the high growth period that we were essentially all the time catching up as growth was outstripping what actually was in the plans. The imagination exercise was that we did this exercise that John referred to, this backcasting idea, that we said, imagine that this would be the end state, this would be the future, that the East region and perhaps the Dublin-Belfast corridor in particular would be the single city in the country. Not the question, will we get there or should we get there, but the question, it is reality and how did we get there? And that threw up a very interesting conclusions from the people who were at that workshop, that there were actually very, very strong reasons to suggest that it is actually very likely that we would get there. So by analyzing backwards, by backcasting from a future picture, we had to conclude, and this is the elephant in the room, that everything else being equal, there was a very, very strong likelihood that that might actually be the outcome. And spatial implications of growth are very, very important to consider, I think, and we have been weak in Ireland in this regard. At every single workshop that we held throughout the country, I put up this picture that James Nix published in the Irish Times some years ago of his idea how a motorway network should be on the right-hand side and how it was on the left-hand side, as the difference between incrementalism and imagining a future spatial situation. And recently he told me, when I told him this, that I had done this, he told me that when this was published in the Irish Times, he got an awful lot of phone calls from people who were involved in motorway planning in those days, in the 70s, when nobody expected to really see a motorway system in the country, I suppose. We were solving a bypass problem in Naas, and we have been solving bypass problems ever since, that he said was quite interesting, that people frankly said we should have done the thing on the right. And of course the circles on both pictures are the gateway cities in the National Spatial Strategy. So this idea that you actually come up with a different solution to the current situation. Another example that I used in the workshops was this one, which is a small village in the Netherlands, and the picture in the middle shows the situation, how it existed in the 70s, which was a small village, diagrammatically shown, with a small village center and a nearby railway line. The government designated it a growth center, and this could happen to Lusk or to Athy or any town in the Greater Dublin area as well. And instead of the incremental growth scenario where the village grows into a town and the center grows with it into a town center, and the railway line is actually on the wrong side of the town, they come up with this image, which was to create a vision of a new town which experimented with a ring road and an anti-policy against cars, which has actually resulted in a town which has the highest use of bicycles and also safety record in the country. And of course with the town centre on the railway line, exactly as the textbooks tell us how we should plan a sustainable city. But the really interesting thing is that the existing town, the village, was then becoming a neighborhood in the new town. And to this day you can go there and you